Türkiye'de
Good afternoon. Please take your seats. I call the meeting of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security to order. Colleagues, the agenda for this meeting has been distributed. As usual, could I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections? I'm hearing a slight objection from the Canadian delegation. But, oh, that's an indication of acclamation. Seeing no opposition, the agenda is adopted. Now, at the meeting this morning, we reached Amendment 22. Before moving to Amendment 23, it is the chair's understanding that the Turkish delegation wishes to propose an oral amendment to paragraph 23. I will tell you that I have spoken to Ms. Sederfeld. She feels that the oral amendment is quite appropriate and in fact is helpful to the draft resolution. Now, Mr. Göcer of Turkey, do I understand that you offer this oral amendment? Is that correct, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And with having been advised by the rapporteur that she has no objection to the amendment being considered, does anyone object? There being no objection, the amendment will be considered. Mr. Göcer, you are recognized to speak on your oral amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thanks for Sederfeld. We would like to make an oral amendment to paragraph 23 of the draft resolution and reformulate it with a call on all participating states to uphold their OSCE commitments and make use of OSCE toolbox. As I mentioned at the morning session of the first committee, it is the duty of all participating states to uphold their OSCE commitments and use the OSCE tools. None of us are immune immune from challenges. We are believe also that there is still room for development for every country, including Turkey, to enhance and to better uphold the OSCE commitments. So, we kindly ask for full support of all committee members to this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Seeing none, what is the opinion of Ms. Sederfeld on the amendment?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree on the amendment.
I shall now put the oral amendment to the vote. It will be decided by a simple majority. Will all of those in favor of the oral amendment please raise their voting cards? And cards down. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Are there abstentions? Noted. And the oral amendment is adopted. We will now continue our consideration of the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. We have 11 yet to consider. In discussing amendments, I will call the proposer of the amendment or amendments first, and then we'll call for any opponents of the amendment. I will then ask Ms. Sederfeld, the sponsor of the draft resolution, for her opinion. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. In the interest of time, if there's a very clear majority in a vote on an amendment, I will announce the result only. If the vote is close, then with the assistance of clerical help at the dais, we will announce the numbers voting for, against, and abstaining. I now call Ms. Michelson from Norway to propose her amendment number 23. Ms. Michelson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I still think it's important to point out the problems and the challenges we have in Turkey. So I propose to add the following to the paragraph 23 after the words external threats. And in this regard, regrets the measures taken against Turkish parliamentarians, including their imprisonment and depriving them of the possibility to exercise their popular mandate. The draft resolution does not otherwise mention the imprisonment of Turkish parliamentarians. Nonetheless, our Parliamentary Assembly has repeatedly reiterated its strong solidarity with the Turkish people in their fight for the reiterated preservation of democratic institutions following July 2016 failed coup. We have reiterated our expressed concerns over the arrest of parliamentarians, reiterated several times during the past year. We have also expressed our hope that the Turkish parliament would continue to play an important role in public debate on Turkey's challenges and threats, and still ensure adherence to fundamental freedoms. I think this should be reflected in this draft solution, so I urge support. Even if we have changed the paragraph 23, I think it's important to point out the problems we have in Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 23? Yes, the delegate from Turkey is recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Again, we are against this proposal. In this regard, I would like to make a few brief remarks. The impunity of 154 MPs from all political parties represented in the Parliament was lifted in June 2016 as a result of 810 pending case files before the judicial authorities. In this context, AK Party, CHP and MHP deputies, including party leaders, have already given depositions. Certain HDP MPs deliberately refused to give depositions despite the call of judicial authorities. Courts issued arrest warrants to complete proceedings. Some have been detained on remand. Others have been released with judicial control measures. The process continues in accordance with our national legislation. It is conducted in line with the principles of the rule of law and in observance of our international obligations. There is an ongoing legal process. No one is above the law, Utmost attention is needed to avoid intervening in the independence of judiciary. In a country where the rule of law reigns, no criminal activity can go unnoticed. It is not important whether perpetrators are elected MPs or not. This is how the rule of law works in all democratic countries. So we call for the rejection of this amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. What is Ms. Setterfeldt's opinion on the amendment?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am in favor of the amendment. I think it's extremely important that we adopt this amendment. The change in the paragraph, I agreed on that, the oral amendment, because of that, I think it's important that all OSCE countries keep its commitment. And in that includes that the situation for the Turkish parliamentarians. I am in favor of the amendments. Thanks.
I shall now put Amendment 23 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 23 please raise their voting cards? Please lower your voting cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. And please lower your cards. And are there any abstentions? And the Amendment 23 is adopted. We now move to Amendment 24, and I call on Mr. Sondergaard from Denmark to propose Amendment 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we discussed earlier, there was a very harsh attack from President Erdogan on the election observation from Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly and from the ODIHR. A very harsh attack, and he even enlarged that harsh attack to also count on OSCE as a whole. In a speech on election night, even before the report was made, he said, and I will quote what he was saying, he said, "We will neither see, consider, nor recognize those political motivated reports that you will draft. And he said, first, you should know your place. That was his answer to organizations where Turkey themselves is a member. That is not good. That is very bad. And I think it's important that we use this opportunity to take distance from these attacks. Also because if we accept such kind of attacks on ODIHR, on Council of Europe, PA election observations, what will happen in the future when we have election observations together with them? This is, as Erdogan himself said, also an attack on us. And therefore, I would forward this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wishes to speak against Amendment 24? The delegate from Turkey.
Thank you, Chair. Again, we are against this proposal as well. Our authorities extended their full cooperation to the limited referendum observation mission throughout the country, as underlined during our various contacts with mission members themselves before and after the referendum. However, we faced with a clearly biased approach based on prejudices. Politically motivated and accusatory statements were used in the report. These statements go well beyond the mandate of monitoring mission. One of the observers shamelessly gave a pose in front of the so-called flag of PKK terrorist organization that it cost tens of thousands of lives in Turkey. And then, even more shamelessly, he posted it on social media. It is not possible to give any credence to report drawn by a delegation comprising such a person. Moreover, some others engaged in activities that clearly supported one side of the campaign, thus compromising their neutrality. We have always welcomed objective criticism. What we expect from ODIHR and Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe is to reflect their experience to ensure objectivity and impartiality of observation missions. I would like to underline that Turkey firmly opposes the principle of the rule of law. Despite the extraordinary circumstances in our nation has gone through, all fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of assembly, are fully respected and guaranteed under our Constitution. We therefore call for the rejection of this amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. What is the rapporteur's opinion of the amendment?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am in favor of the amendments. It highlights the importance of the security of international observers, and I think, therefore, it's important. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Setterfeld. Are you ready to vote on Amendment 24? All those in favor of Amendment 24, please raise your voting cards. And cards down. Those opposed to Amendment 24, raise your voting cards. And thank you. You may lower your cards. Those abstaining. Thank you. And Amendment 24 is adopted. Before I ask Ms. Bellens to propose Amendment 25, it has been brought to my notice that the amendment paper is incorrect. The preamble to Amendment 25 should read as follows, quote, after paragraph 24, insert the following new paragraph, semicolon, unquote. Without objection, that will be the text that is inserted. I now call on Ms. Bellens from Belgium to propose her Amendment 25.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment results from the finding that OSCE missions are confronted more and more with obstacles that do not allow them to fulfill their tasks properly. This cannot be tolerated and does not correspond with the main goals of our organization. We need to guarantee peace and respect for democracy by cooperation among participating states. Therefore, I find that the importance of the field missions needs to be underlined by this amendment. The field missions are of utmost importance to control to which extent the efforts and the engagement of OSCE have concrete results. Therefore, it is important to create an environment that allows that the work of the field missions is a success. The result of these field missions contribute to the general interest and allow us to exchange best practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 25? What is Ms. Setterfeld's opinion of the amendment?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am in favor of the amendment when it's to put it in after the paragraph 24. Thanks.
I shall now put Amendment 25 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 25 please raise their voting cards? Thank you. You may lower your cards. Those against, please raise their voting cards. And are there abstentions? And Amendment number 25 is adopted. Amendments 26 and 27 both relate to paragraph 26 and the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. I will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed under Rule 22.7 of the Rules of Procedure. Please note that if Amendment 26 is agreed to, Amendment 27 will be preempted and will not be put to a vote. I call on Mr. Tolstoy of the Russian Federation to speak to Amendment 26. Sir, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Эта поправка призвана сбалансировать позицию ОБСЕ. В докладе мониторинговой миссии нет никаких упоминаний о так называемых российских гибридных силах. Это лживый штамп украинской пропаганды. А обстрелы, запугивания и другие трудности, с которыми сталкиваются наблюдатели ОБСЕ, которые, безусловно, недопустимы, происходят по обе стороны разграничения во внутриукраинском конфликте. Мы предлагаем потребовать от обеих сторон внутриукраинского конфликта неукоснительного соблюдения мандата и обеспечения безопасности наблюдателей ОБСЕ. Считаю, что это отвечает целям и задачам нашей организации. Хочу сказать, что несбалансированный в отношении России пункт, предложенный госпожой Сегерфельд, только затруднит дальнейшую работу миссии в зоне конфликта на Украине, к которому Российская Федерация отношения не имеет. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Tolstoy. I now call on Mr. Aby of Switzerland to speak to Amendment 27.
Herr Vorsitzender, geschätzte Damen und Herren, die Schweiz ist der Auffassung, dass die OSZE die vereinbarte Plattform darstellt, die sich mit der Umsetzung des Minsk-Übereinkommens befasst. Daher schlagen wir vor, die von der trilateralen Kontaktgruppe der OSZE verwendete Formulierung und Sprachregelung zu verwenden, wenn vom Konflikt in der östlichen Ukraine die Rede ist. Den letzten Teil des Paragraphen wollen wir streichen, weil nicht nur die russische Föderation, sondern alle irgendwie am Konflikt Beteiligten sich für gute Bedingungen für die Special Monitoring Mission einsetzen müssen. Also auch die Ukraine und die de facto Behörde der Gebiete um Donetsk und Lugansk. Wir verstehen sehr gut, weshalb die ukrainische Delegation, sowie, glaube ich, auch andere, den Originaltext von Paragraph 26 bevorzugt, und wir respektieren diese Position. Wir sind jedoch der Meinung, dass man in dieser parlamentarischen Versammlung diesen Konflikt nicht noch mehr anheizen sollen, sondern dass wir den Ton und die Dialogsatmosphäre finden müssen, um diesen Konflikt zu lösen. Das ist die Rolle der OSZE und unsere Dokumente müssen das Ziel haben, die OSZE als Friedensstifterin zu stärken und nicht zu schwächen. Das ist der Sinn unseres Vorschlages.
Thank you. The business before the committee is amendments 26 and 27. Does anyone wish to speak against either amendment? The delegate from Ukraine, for what purpose? To speak against which amendment? To speak against both amendments. Yes, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we all support the activities of the SMM, the seriousness of the security threats affecting the monitors in the non-government controlled areas of Donbass demands us to unite in specific condemnation of pressure, harassment, and intimidation of the special monitoring mission from Russian hybrid forces. I would like to stress once again that the territories under special monitoring mission observation in Donbass are not controlled by Ukrainian government, and they are temporarily occupied with Russian hybrid forces. Therefore, we should urge the Russian Federation to put an end to these unacceptable practices. So we oppose Amendment 26 and propose to retain the original text of the paragraph. Regarding Amendment 27, we oppose as well this amendment and propose to retain the original text of the paragraph. The SMM chief monitor and his deputy often point out that the SMM performs monitoring and leaves it to the OSCE states to make conclusions. Based on available facts, the hybrid Russian forces, which consist of Russian regular servicemen and irregulars and mercenaries, are trained, equipped and financed by Russia. It is within Russia's power to stop hostilities and to stop intimidation and harassment of SMM by forces under its control. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair will recognize one other delegate if anyone wishes to speak against either of the amendments. Does such a person seek recognition? Seeing none, what is the opinion of Ms. Sederfeld with regard to the amendments?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will speak about both of them, and I am against Amendment 26 as well as Amendment 27. For me, it's important to support peace. So the Russian aggression could stop and the Minsk Agreement 1 and 2 could be fulfilled. Yesterday, we did listen to Ambassador Ertuğrul Apakan, who spoke about the important work performed by women and men who voluntarily support peace in their duties for the SMM. I do also want to mention the special monitor, Joseph Stone, who was killed. We should recognize his work and what he have done to build peace. And the German woman and the man who was injured. I think this shows the importance of the SMM, and because of this, I am against the 2 amendments. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Rapporteur. I shall now put Amendment 26 to the vote. Please note that if Amendment 26 is agreed to, Amendment 27 will be preempted and will not be put to a vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 26 please raise their voting cards? Thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. You may lower your cards. Are there abstentions to Amendment 26? And Amendment 26 is not adopted. Therefore, we will now move to a vote on Amendment 27. Are you ready to vote on Amendment 27? Will those in favor of Amendment 27 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed to Amendment 27, please raise your voting cards. The amendment is rejected. Are there any who wish to abstain? Thank you. The amendment is not agreed to, and we will move to Mr. Guliev from Azerbaijan. Sir, you are recognized to speak in favor of your amendment number 28.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My amendment is about the activity of the co-chairs of Minsk Group. As you may know, that this year we are going to mark 25th anniversary of the creation of the Minsk Group. And unfortunately, this mediation effort doesn't bring any result. This is why this amendment expresses its deep regret over the lack of progress towards the settlement of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, calls on the parties to engage without further delay into substantive negotiations with a view to finding an earlier sustainable solution to the conflict, and also urge the co-chairmen of the Minsk Group to redouble their efforts to that end. So the proposed paragraph aims at sending clear political signal by the OSCE to the parties to the conflict. It is the view of the international community, including the heads of the state of co-chairing countries of the Minsk Group, that the conflict must be solved through negotiations. This is supported by the chairman in office and the UN Secretary General. This is why I think the PS, this amendment serves to add the PS much needed voice to this cause and contribute to ongoing efforts to intensify negotiations for the final and the durable solution based on norms and principles of international law. I call distinguished members, also rapporteur, to support this amendment in the sake of the peace and security in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 28? The distinguished representative from Armenia.
Уважаемые коллеги, любая статья, которая относится к такому деликатному вопросу, как урегулирование конфликтов, должна быть беспристрастна и сбалансирована. Предложение, которое сейчас озвучили наши коллеги, таковым не является. Почему? Обращаю внимание коллег и уважаемой докладчицы. Во-первых, потому что из первоначального текста выпадает слово и цель деэскалации ситуации, которое было в исходном тексте и является на сегодняшний день обязательным и самым главным. Во-вторых, предложение содержит призыв к сопредседателям Минской группы ОБСЕ удвоить свои усилия. Мы не против того, чтобы кто-нибудь из вовлеченных в урегулирование конфликта был призван удвоить, утроить или удесятерить свои усилия. Но если необходимо выступать с призывом незамедлительно, то это должно быть адресовано в первую очередь к сторонам конфликта, в первую очередь к тем, кто усиливает эскалацию напряжения и которые должны осуществлять соглашения, достигнутые при посредничестве сопредседателей Минской группы ОБСЕ. Призывая только сопредседателей, мы создаем впечатление, что ответственность за урегулирование конфликта лежит только на них, при том, что главная ответственность лежит на сторонах конфликта. Исходя из этих соображений, мы не согласны с этим предложением и просим коллег отвергнуть это предложение. Спасибо.
What is the opinion of Ms. Sederfeld?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the situation and the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh is it's a problematic situation, and it's one of the protracted conflict in the OSCE area. I found that the amendment reflect the need of, that all parts need to be included. And that's very, very important, and that's why I am in favor of the amendment. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Sederfeld. I shall now put Amendment 28 to the vote. Are members ready to vote on Amendment 28? Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Will members opposed to Amendment 28 please raise their voting cards? And then are there those who abstained? And the amendment is adopted. Amendment 28 is adopted. I now call on Mr. Kafkalias from Cyprus to propose Amendment 29. Sir, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In connection with paragraph 8, we deem of utmost significance the inclusion of a paragraph in the operative part of the resolution, which stresses the need for tighter arms export policies by major arms exporters in strict compliance with international law, international humanitarian law, and human rights law. According to the data published by the Stockholm International Peace Institute, from 2007 to 2016, arms imports by states in the Middle East rose by 86%, and accounted for 29% of global imports between 2012 and 2016. As a matter of fact, the dramatic calls of the international community for peace and security in this region do not match the actions of major arms exporters, since arms are transferred abundantly in respective of recipient states records regarding democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 29? If not, what is Ms. Sederfeld's opinion of the amendment?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am against the amendment. I agree that there is a need for the arms export policies and the control. I think that's very important. But such an important issue need a more precise, be issued more precise than the Middle East region. Middle East region is a very, very wide region. And when we are talking about a tighter arms export, it would be more helpful to have a precise definition. That's why I am against the amendment. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I shall now put Amendment 29 to the vote. Will all of those in favor of the Amendment 29 raise their voting cards? Mr. Clerk, will you help me count? Yes. 1, 2. Not sure. But please, those in favor, please raise their voting cards and keep them up. Okay, lower your voting cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And the issue is clear. The amendment is adopted. Who wishes to abstain? The amendment is adopted. Amendment 29 is adopted, and I appreciate the delegates' patience with our count. Amendments 30 and 31 relate to text in paragraph 34, which is on the subject of gender equality and the protection of women's rights. I will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed under the rules. I call on Mrs. Fry from Canada to propose amendments 30 and 31. Mrs. Fry, you are recognized.
Doesn't speak against the paragraph 34, but what it does is it builds on the original language of that paragraph to reinforce that women are not just victims during conflict, but in fact they have untold potential to prevent conflict and to play a real role in the conflict cycle, starting better inclusion and representation in these areas. And as you well know, the gender perspectives of humanitarian relief are essential, but the proposed amendment recognizes that these considerations can be guaranteed by having more women in decision-making roles at the table. Better education and training opportunities are needed to help overcome the barriers that currently exist, and this amendment urges participating states to provide funding and to support the related initiatives for education and training of women so that they can play their full role in that cycle of conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against either of these amendments? Seeing none, Ms. Sederfeld, what is your opinion of the amendments?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am in favor of the amendments. Thank you.
Without objection, I will put amendments 30 and 31 to the vote together. Will all in favor of adopting amendments 30 and 31, please raise your voting cards. And thank you. You may lower your cards. Are there those who are opposed? If so, please raise your cards. Are there abstentions? And without objection, amendments 30 and 31 are adopted. We now call on Ms. Bellens from Belgium to propose Amendment 32, and I would congratulate my fellow delegates. We are nearing the end of the draft of consideration of the amendments to the draft resolution. Ms. Bellens, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, although this paragraph is urging to establish more smooth decisions procedures, it seemed important to me to add a paragraph inviting the Secretariat to make proposals in order to find a way out of situations that do not come to a solution. It is, of course, important that we develop and discuss in this assembly ideas that inspire the governments of our participating states, but this does not withstand giving some power to the Secretariat to negotiate with our governments about broadening the scope of decision procedures. I'm in favor of a backup system that is applied to solve deadlock situations if the consensus method does not work. Consensus stays the main goal. All decisions are just an illusion as long as there is no consensus to be found. Thank you.
Thank you. And who wishes to speak against Amendment 32? Yes, the delegate from the Russian Federation is recognized.
Большое спасибо, Слуцкий. Мы не можем ломать процедуру консенсуса. Процедура консенсуса в досье, подобных этому, подрывает сами основы нашей организации. В случае, если мы в данном случае откажемся от консенсуса, мы не сможем принимать решения в вопросах, которые затрагивают саму глубинную суть тех решений, которые мы обсуждаем. Мне кажется, что эта поправка выходит за рамки обсуждаемого доклада и подрывает институциональную основу нашей организации. Мы не должны допускать принятия подобных поправок. Спасибо.
Thank you. And now what is Ms. Setterfeldt's opinion of the amendment?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am against the amendment. I am in favor to keep my paragraph number 36 as is written because it do reflect in a much easier way the work and the revision of our work in OSCE. I don't think we should go in the internal work and describe it the way that it's done in the amendment, and some of these parts also in the amendment is not on our table to discuss. It's decisions that are made at another level because it's about the OSCE and what OSCE should do and how OSCE should work. And I must also want to remind that there is a ad hoc working group on our bylaws led by Lord Bones. It don't attach everything here, but some parts of it, and I am against the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Rapporteur. Are you ready to vote then on Amendment 32? All in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. And you may lower your cards. Are there abstentions? And the amendment is not agreed to. We now move to Amendment 33, and I call on Ms. Bellens from Belgium to propose her Amendment 33.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As for this amendment, I would want to say that the intention of the amendment is not to replace paragraph 37, but to add. It's the same as, I don't remember one before, and normally amendment 32 was meant also to add, but it's voted, so I won't come back on it. But for this amendment, it's really important that it's not to replace paragraph 37. I already observed that the functioning of the OSCE is put into danger because of insufficient funding and budgetary problems. It seems to me that this problem results from the way the OSCE funding works as a mix of formal and voluntary contributions of the participating states. Unfortunately, the financial crisis of 2008 and the slow process of economic recovery that do not encourage some participating states to raise their financial contributions. Although the current system can be justified from a perspective of neutrality of the OSCE, I'm convinced that the Secretariat can put forward proposals to find a solution for this problem of financial contributions and to avoid that the autonomous functioning of the OSCE is put into danger, fully respecting the neutrality of OSCE.
Thank you. And who wishes to speak against the amendment? The delegate from Greece.
I think it's really about time to start asking the states to raise contributions in international organizations. This doesn't mean that we don't have to examine and be more efficient in the work that we're doing in these organizations, but asking for more funding at the time of deep crisis will give completely the wrong signal to everyone. I think this is going to the wrong direction.
And what is the opinion of Ms. Sederfeld with regard to Amendment 33?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am against the amendment. I am against it because I don't think this is the fora where we should have a discussion about the item in the amendment. I do also want to mention that what we decide here is one part of the Minsk Declaration. And I think it's important that the final part in the resolution is actually to retrying the unique role of the Parliamentarian Assembly, and that it's built on dialogue, trust, mutual respect between the OSCE countries. That's why I am against the amendment. But bring the question up in another fora, in another debate, but I don't see that this is the place. Thanks.
Thank you. Are you ready to vote then on Amendment 33? Those in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting cards. And thank you. Those opposed to Amendment 33, thank you, and you may lower your cards. Are there abstentions? Thank you, and the amendment is defeated. That concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you. Now, at the conclusion of general debate, I announced that if time were available, we might be able to return briefly to general debate after the debate on amendments and before a vote on the final draft resolution. In that regard, one member, and only one, has asked for time to speak in general debate. And so at this point, the chair recognizes Lisa Chambers of Ireland, who would like to speak in general debate on the resolution. Ma'am, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I want to commend Mrs. Sederfeld for her work on the the report and the draft resolution, and to commend all of the speakers today on the report. Just to make a couple of points, I found the commentary around cybersecurity very interesting. And certainly I would agree with the words of the rapporteur that we must work together in reducing the risk of conflict coming from cyber attacks. Certainly we must share our knowledge and our expertise, and it is one of the biggest threats facing, I think, every country, and it knows no borders. I want to make the point, it's something that concerns myself, is that in solving this problem, we must also not create another problem. I know many citizens of every country very much value their right to privacy. And I think in dealing with this particular challenge, and it's certainly a most difficult challenge, we must also respect the freedoms and the rights that we have earned over many years. So I want every member state and every participating state to be very cognizant of the rights of citizens in terms of their privacy. Also, in relation to the issue on terrorism, and certainly to condemn most strongly the acts of terrorism that we have seen across Europe in the last number of months. I also want to make the point that we must engage with communities. We must not put borders up. We must not put up obstacles to engaging with communities. This is not the way to solve this problem. We will only solve this problem by coming together as one international community. And I do fear that sometimes in a reaction to such terrible atrocities, we often close our doors and our minds to these communities. So I think that in addressing this very serious issue, we must engage constructively with all stakeholders. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you very much. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Are you ready to vote on final adoption of the draft resolution as amended? Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Please lower your cards. Would those against, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. You may lower your cards. and those who wish to abstain. And the draft resolution as amended is adopted. We now move to consideration of the first supplementary item referred to us by the Standing Committee, entitled Restoration of the Sovereignty and Territorial Integrity of Ukraine. There is one amendment to this item. I give the floor to Mr. Gerasimov from Ukraine, the sponsor of the draft resolution. Mr. Gerasimov, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, I wish to introduce my draft resolution on the restoration of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine by pointing out to our common recognition of the essential role of the civil society in promoting peace and security. On 4th of July, an OSCE parallel civil society forum took place in Minsk and adopted its resolution with assessment and recommendations on addressing the critical security challenges. At the top of these challenges remains the ongoing Russian aggression against Ukraine. Let me make a few quotations from the resolution of this civil society forum. In the context of the war in eastern Ukraine and the occupation of Crimea, the worst breach of Helsinki Final Act principles in the history of the OSCE was not effectively reversed in 2016-2017 and continues to strongly undermine international security and cooperation, the three dimensions of the OSCE, and the very ability of the organization to function. Crimea remains de facto under the control of the Russian Federation in violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and in direct violation of the Helsinki Final Act principles. The situation on the peninsula has deteriorated further in 2016-17. Russia has not implemented a single recommendation from the July 2015 report of the OSCE Human Rights Assessment Mission on Crimea. The ongoing devastating conflict in Donbas region in the east of Ukraine poses great challenges to Ukraine, Russia, and the entire OSCE region. A few more quotations. In Donetsk and Luhansk regions, which are currently outside Ukrainian governmental control, human rights protection is not existent due to the lack of access to justice both on national and international levels. The Russian Federation is responsible under international law for human rights violations in these areas, as it effectively controls the armed groups there. The restoration of security is impossible without the complete restoration of Ukrainian control over its borders and monitoring of all border crossing points by the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. Let me remind, it was the quotations from the Civil Society Forum which held in Minsk a few days ago. These few quotations underscore that the OSCE democratic community of states and the civil society largely see eye-to-eye the gravity of the situation stemming from Russia's armed intervention into Ukraine and its large-scale negative consequences. There is an undiminished demand for a strong and united position of our Assembly to stop the aggression, which continues as we speak, and to make Russia renew respect to the rules-based security order. The proposed draft resolution contains important provisions which are essential for upholding OSCE principles and commitments, peaceful resolution of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and implementation of the Minsk agreements, protection of human rights and freedoms, the occupation of Crimea, restoration of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, thus paving the way for restoration of trust and confidence. The adoption of this draft resolution will reinforce the position of this Assembly expressed at Baku, Helsinki, and Tbilisi annual sessions. We call upon all members of the Assembly to support this supplementary item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gerasimov. And now the floor is open for debate. The time limit set for speeches is 2 minutes. If there are many members wishing to speak, we may reduce the time limit to try to accommodate as many people as possible. So far, we stick to the 2 minutes. I give the floor now to Mr. Grant of the United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Morantan Gutierrez, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I want to speak in favour of this item, not because I think it's up to me to decide what should happen to Crimea and to Ukraine. It's up to the people of Ukraine. There have been opinions voiced here this week to suggest that Crimea is anything other than part of Ukraine. These opinions are not borne out by fact. It is a matter of fact. It is a matter of international law. Crimea and the Donbass regions are part of the territory of the Ukraine. That means nobody outside of Ukraine has any right to interfere in them politically, economically, and most important, militarily. It is legitimate for the Russian government to have concerns or disagreements about the direction that Ukraine wants to travel in. It is not legitimate for the Russian government to express those concerns by the use of military force, by armed invasion of the sovereign territory of another country. If the Russian government want to discuss the future of these territories in a civilized way, the first thing they have to do is to get their tanks, their warplanes, their heavy artillery, their soldiers and their terrorist organisations out of Ukrainian territory, get them back to their own Russian territory, and then perhaps we can start to discuss these in a civilised way. But as long as the illegal occupation of part of Ukraine continues, there can be no prospect of reasonable long-term peace in that part of the world. So I hope the delegates today will give their full support to this, to recognise that this territorial integrity of Ukraine and of every other nation represented here has to be protected against armed aggression from any quarter whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. And now I recognize Mrs. Moore of the United States. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I make this intervention for a couple of reasons. First of all, I would like to join Mr. Wicker in providing my condolences to the family of Joseph Stone, who was killed as a conflict monitor. And just to mention and to note that he was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the seat of my constituency. Like so many Wisconsinites, Mr. Stone was very pleased to be in service. And of course, this is service which ultimately cost his life. Ambassador Apokan briefed us yesterday and noted the extreme danger that these individuals put themselves in to do this work. And I urge the OSCE and its institutions that despite this danger, that we continue to do this very, very important work in these conflict regions. And I yield back.
Thank you. And now I recognize to speak Mr. Slutsky of the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Мы вчера слышали видеообращение господина Эртугрула Атакана, главы специальной мониторинговой миссии. И я держал в руках все отчеты данной миссии, и ни в одном из этих отчетов не говорилось ни слова о тяжелых вооружениях, о российских гибридных вооруженных силах, которых не было и нет на юго-востоке Украины. К сожалению, проект резолюции вводит нас в заблуждение. В пункте 21 говорится о призыве к Российской Федерации предоставить беспрепятственный доступ в Крым и Севастополь. Я приглашаю всех в российские Крым и Севастополь, которые вернулись в Российскую Федерацию на основе норм международного права, на основе закрепленной в Уставе Организации Объединенных Наций нормы о праве на самоопределение, и посмотреть своими глазами, как посмотрели уже многие члены Ассамблеи, на то, какую радость испытывают жители Крыма и Севастополя, насколько сегодня гармоничной является и успешной их сегодняшняя жизнь, образование их детей. Милости прошу всех в Крым и в Севастополь. И что касается многочисленных пунктов об оккупации, это не оккупация, дорогие друзья. Оккупация была в 1991 году и аннексия Украиной. Мы в данном случае, принимая подобные резолюции, допускаем чудовищные двойные стандарты, которые подрывают саму суть нашей организации по безопасности и сотрудничеству в Европе и ее парламентской ассамблеи. Я призываю всех голосовать против этой резолюции. И еще раз приглашаю всех в Крым, в Севастополь. Приглашаю организовать специальное слушание по юго-востоку Украины, которые дадут нам правду, ту самую правду, которая есть в документах специальной мониторинговой миссии и которой нет в информации украинской делегации. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Slutsky. And now the floor to Mrs. Jackson-Lee of the United States.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I am in support of the principal sponsor's resolution, the gentleman from Ukraine, and know that all of us wish a free and democratic Ukraine. That is very difficult when the Russian Federation violates the Helsinki principles and seems to ignore the importance of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law found in the Russian Federation. Tragically, because of the situation in Crimea, the monitors that are part of the OSCE are in jeopardy. They're harassed, and they're not protected. I join with Mr. Wicker for his very able and astute amendment that honors Mr. Stone, the late Mr. Stone, in the constituency of my colleague, Ms. Moore, to be able to say to the monitors that you are important. The work you do is crucial, and we need to join together and stop the harassment of these monitors and to protect them against the violence that will cause them to lose their lives. This is the work of the OSCE, as the ambassador who spoke yesterday indicated. This is a part of our values on the Helsinki principles, and what less can we do, and what more can we do than ensure that our voices are heard and the amendment is supported to honor Mr. Stone, but also to ensure that the monitors are protected and not harassed. And I hope that the Russian Federation will see the viability of the gentleman from Ukraine's resolution and come to a resolution themselves that they need to promote the democratic principles and the return of Crimea to Ukraine.
Thank you. And now I recognize Mr. Zabarov of the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Уважаемые коллеги, уже третий год подряд глава украинской делегации вводит вас в заблуждение, говоря об оккупации Крыма. Не говоря об исторических аспектах, Крым всегда был частью России. Там проживает более 75% русских и русскоговорящих. Крымчане не приняли государственный переворот с февраля 2014 года. Они не без оснований боялись националистических вооруженных отрядов, направлявшихся эшелонами на полуостров. Именно поэтому они провели референдум, на котором 97% граждан проголосовали за воссоединение с исторической родиной России. Голосование было абсолютно мирным и соответствовало международному праву. Это было зафиксировано десятками зарубежных наблюдателей и журналистов, приехавших в Крым по собственной инициативе. В соответствии с уставом ООН все народы имеют право на самоопределение. Если бы не произошло этого референдума, то последствия в Крыму были бы гораздо трагичнее, чем даже в Донецке и Луганске. Роль России была лишь в обеспечении мирных, безопасных условий для свободного волеизъявления населения. При этом не было ни одного выстрела, ни одной жертвы. Какая же это оккупация? Косово, где даже не было референдума, Запад признал, а к России постоянно применяются такие двойные стандарты. Давайте будем применять единые стандарты для всех. Сейчас на Украине действует самая большая за всю историю наблюдателей миссии ОБСЕ в Европе. Мы в России с надеждой смотрим на деятельность ОБСЕ по урегулированию украинского кризиса через механизм контактной группы. Предлагаю отклонить резолюцию, предложенную господином Герасимовым. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Zabarov. And now Mr. Rizhak of the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Мне уже сегодня, господин председатель, довелось выступать, и я частично касался этой темы. Я хотел бы обратить внимание еще раз, внимание своих коллег. Вот так в 30-е годы ползучий фашизм потихоньку завладевал умами спокойных европейцев, а потом все мы в коалиции преодолевали чудовищную войну, понесли чудовищные жертвы, и, к сожалению, мы не сделали соответствующих выводов для себя. Вот и сейчас мы поощряем ростки неонацизма на Украине, с помощью которого сейчас вдалбливается фашистская идеология в умы украинцев, которая не принимает этой власти, дают ей принципиальную оценку. И вы еще будете жалеть о том, когда в ближайшее время события на самой Украине заставят вас переосмыслить вот эти постулаты, которые вы выдвигаете в отношении граждан Крыма. Мы еще раз подтверждаем и приглашаем вас в Крым, чтобы вы воочию сами убедились, какой выбор сделал народ Крыма, который все эти годы оккупации выдержал ее, вынес ее с честью и добился путем свободного референдума реализации своих законных гражданских прав. Мы не можем принимать такую резолюцию и считаем, что это позорно принимать ее в 21 веке, когда фашизм вновь поднимает голову, и мы не можем дать ему принципиальную оценку. Я уже касался сегодня о том, что у нас есть проверенная, достоверная информация, что идеологи, некоторые сторонники ИГИЛ и других террористических организаций находятся под трепетным патронажем украинского правительства. Опомнитесь, господа, и еще раз будьте бдительны, вспомните слова великого Фучика. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you. And the next speaker, I recognize Mr. Vavrik from Austria. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The colleague from the Russian Federation took make historical references and to fascism and to the 30s. So I would like to make the point coming from a country that has been in a very similar situation to Ukraine today in the 30s. Austria, after World War I, was left over as the breakup of an empire, similarly to Ukraine was left over as the breakup of the Soviet Empire a few years ago. And we faced, like Ukraine today, political crisis, economic crisis. We were searching for our identity as a state, as a country, as a nation. And that's not an easy thing. And at that time, a big neighbor, Nazi Germany, was taking advantage of that. And on the argument that we were the same nation, spoke the same language, had a shared culture, wanted to impose a reunification. And they did this by infiltrating our politics, blackmailing Austria economically, intervening politically, and ultimately invading Austria. And the world community looked upon it, did not react. The only country who protested was Mexico. And for that we named Mexico Platz, a place in Vienna. And then 1 year later, Nazi Germany, together with Russia, attacked Poland, launching World War II. So I think if we take historical references, beware of the beginning, and the minimum we can do today is to support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vavrik. And now I recognize Mr. Tolstoy of the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Хотелось бы моему австрийскому коллеге напомнить, кто освободил Австрию и Вену от фашистов. И хочу сказать по поводу резолюции, представленной нашими коллегами с Украины, 36 пунктов. Автор резолюции практически в каждом пункте выдвигает обвинения в адрес России. Мы не хотели, конечно, идти по этому пути, поэтому предлагали отказаться от рассмотрения этой резолюции. Но я хочу сказать, что если Ассамблея хочет, Россия может представить 136 пунктов по фактам нарушения фундаментальных прав всех международных норм со стороны нынешних властей Украины, пришедших к власти в результате государственного переворота, поддержанного, кстати, рядом европейских государств. К сожалению. Потеря суверенитета, о восстановлении которого говорится в этой резолюции, это как раз следствие этого государственного переворота в 2014 году. Это следствие политики вытеснения русских и русского языка на Украине, попытки вооруженным путем подавить протесты в Крыму и на востоке Украины после государственного переворота, нарушившего конституцию страны. С применением танков, артиллерии. Между прочим, сотни детей, женщин и гражданского населения погибли в этом конфликте. Жалко, что ни авторы этой резолюции, ни здесь присутствующие коллеги из парламентов других стран не обращают на это внимания. Жалко, что они не видели кадры артиллерийских обстрелов со стороны регулярной украинской армии жилых кварталов Донбасса, глаза детей, которые сидят по подвалам в 21 веке. И вы хотите, чтобы мы равнодушно на это взирали? Вы хотите, чтобы мы продолжали мириться с теми лживыми утверждениями, которые выдвигает украинская делегация на этой сессии? Почему-то в ОБСЕ об этом говорили крайне мало, так же, как и в европейской прессе. Мы об этом сожалеем. Не говоря уже о том, что сегодня на Украине героизируются нацистские преступники, участники Холокоста. Вы согласны с этим? Вы, все представители парламентов мира, которые осуждают Холокост, согласны с тем, что улицы на Украине переименовываются, снимаются таблички с именами русских генералов, которые освобождали Украину, и ставятся таблички с именами Шухевича и Бандеры, участников Холокоста? Я уверен в том, что Ассамблея не должна принимать подобного рода резолюции. Но если это будет сделано, то, безусловно, российская делегация представит и свой проект. Не на этой сессии, так на следующей. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Tolstoy. And now the floor is for Mr. Kovalyov.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Я бы подчеркнул прежде всего, что постоянный комитет, принимая решение о включении этого дополнительного проекта, который мы сейчас обсуждаем, принял политическое решение. С сожалением констатирую, что эти политические заявления, не основанные на фактах, продолжаются и здесь, в нашем зале. Я предлагаю обсудить эту резолюцию с юридической, правовой точки зрения прежде всего. Начнем с того, что каждый пункт противоречит друг другу. В одном говорится о праве нации на самоопределение, а в другом провозглашается ровно наоборот принцип вмешательства во внутренние дела других государств. Например, сравните пункты 1, 2, 3 предлагаемой резолюции с пунктами 4, 28, 29 и 35. Принцип невмешательства во внутренние дела государства, а во втором тут же идет призыв вмешаться именно во внутренние дела. Таким образом, полностью отсутствует логика. Я вообще хочу вам сказать, призываю еще раз к профессионализму и к юридической зрелости нашей Ассамблеи. Пункт 13 – это вообще не поддается никакому описанию. Там говорится о пересечении границы рядом лиц, большим количеством лиц, одетым в форму, похожую на военную. Что мы должны делать, исходя из этого пункта? Ввести дресс-код на границе? Постановить, чтобы пропускали через границу только людей, одетых в костюмы и в галстуках? Это вообще с юридической точки зрения абсолютный нонсенс. Теперь смотрите, если эта резолюция принимается, почитайте определение, что такое суверенитет. Я зачитываю непосредственно из той научной работы, где дается это определение. Суверенитет означает страну независимую, государство, не обладающее суверенитетом, это колония, либо доминион, зависимая территория, находящаяся под властью иностранного государства. Если вы проголосуете за эту резолюцию, фактически вы соглашаетесь с тем, что это колония или доминион. Я не думаю, что украинский народ согласится с этим определением. Нельзя по юридическим мотивам принимать эту резолюцию. Я прошу вас воздержаться от этой стратегической ошибки.
Thank you, Mr. Kovalyov. If there is anyone that want to speak, should say it now. Otherwise, we move to Mr. Gerasimov of Ukraine. You have the floor.
Dear Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, just a few comments before we will start to vote for amendment and for the supplementary item. First of all, we need restoration of our sovereignty, Ukrainian sovereignty, on those territories which are now occupied. Second one, when we are speaking about so-called referendum in Crimea, From which time referendum under Kalashnikov is correspondent to the international law values and principles? As for me, not. And the last but not least, for those who again trying to say that Russian army is not present in occupied territory and in the reports of the SMM OSCE. From these reports, what does it mean? R330 Zhitel or thermobaric system Buratino, Pinocchio? Do you know it or not? It's from the reports of the SMM OSCE. Let me tell you, this is the latest example of the Russian modern weapon mentioned in the occupied territory of Donbass by SMM OSCE, pointed in the reports. So please don't lie here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerasimov. I consider that we move to the consideration of the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. Copies of the amendments have been made available. The correct version is entitled AS17 SI2 amend. In discussing amendments, I will call the proposer of the amendment first, and then we'll call any opponent of the amendment. I ask speakers to observe a time limit of 1 minute. I will then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution, Mr. Gerasimov, for his opinion. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. I will pass to Amendment 1, and I call Mr. Wicker from the United States to propose Amendment 1. You have the floor, Mr. Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And because of the solemnity of the subject matter, I felt strongly that I should personally speak from our delegation with regard to this amendment. My amendment calls international attention to an unprecedented death. For the first time ever, a member of a special monitoring mission of the OSCE was killed in the line of duty. On April 23rd, my fellow American Joseph Stone died while serving in Ukraine. He was an American, but he could have been from anywhere. And in fact, also injured in this attack was a mission member from the Czech Republic and also one from Germany. In that regard, I appreciate the co-sponsorship of this amendment by delegates from the Czech Republic. And I appreciate the verbal support of this amendment by Ms. Barnett from Germany, and would also acknowledge that my amendment has co-sponsorship from our fellow colleagues from Canada, from Belarus, and from the Russian Federation. I appreciate all of the co-sponsorship. By adopting this amendment, the Assembly would send a much-needed message in support of Joseph Stone's loved ones, as well as the men and women Joseph Stone worked with, the mission monitors who continue to do this vital and dangerous work every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wicker. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 1? So, doesn't seem the case. Mr. Gerasimov, what's your opinion on the amendment?
We totally support this amendment, and I want to say thank you for Senator Wicker for those amendments. Thank you.
I shall put Amendment 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 1 please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise their voting cards? Any abstentions? So the Amendment 1 is adopted. So that concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, please raise their voting cards. Thank you. Would those against please raise their voting cards? Any abstention? The draft resolution is, as amended, is clearly adopted. Thank you. We now move to the consideration of the second supplementary item referred to us by the Standing Committee, strengthening the Fine. So procedurally, we stop the meeting now. We'll resume it tomorrow with the supplementary items strengthening the role of the OSCE in countering terrorism. So we'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in this very room. So thank you for the expedited work that we have performed, and see all of you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
I survived.